The last American casualties in Vietnam were 2 United States Marines killed together in action in Vietnam on April 29th, 1975. It took 8 increasingly intense years of protest, and the protesters won. That's how that war ended. The protests seemed hopeless for most of those 8 years, but in the end, the United States surrendered in defeat in Vietnam because the anti-war protest movement won. They gradually convinced enough Democratic members of the House and Senate to stop funding America's deadliest war since World War II, and Republican President Gerald Ford had to give up. Republican Secretary of State Henry Kissinger complained for the rest of his life that Democrats in Congress would not allow him to continue fighting that war the way he wanted to. Most of the protesters were somber and serious, like Vietnam veteran John Kerry, who courageously testified to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and delivered the strongest condemnation of that war that the Senate had ever heard. John Kerry would go on to serve as the chairman of that same Senate Foreign Relations Committee. But there was another side of the protest movement personified by Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, the leaders of what they called the Yippies. Almost everyone in the protest movement was a hippie, but the Yippies brought a captivating silliness to everything they did. TV news cameras loved the Yippies' antics at protests, including the day the Yippies surrounded the Pentagon, promising to levitate it. And then there were the flower children, the mellowest of hippies who gave the world a different perspective on the National Guard troops who were called out by President Richard Nixon to intimidate protesters. This is one of the most powerful images of the entire era of protest, an anonymous flower child placing a flower in the barrel of a soldier's rifle. The flower turned out to be more powerful than the rifle. The flower won. Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin laughed at Richard Nixon. They laughed at Henry Kissinger. They laughed at the federal judge who presided over their trial, known as the trial of the Chicago 7. They laughed at the judge who would be legally empowered to send them to prison, and they turned him into a small man, a small, petty man who, as it happened, never got the chance to send them to prison. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saw none of that. She was born 14 years after the last American military soldiers those Marines were killed in Vietnam. But she has had an idea that the Yippies and the flower children would like. Laugh at them. Make them small.
Tom Homan, who was the acting director of ICE, who was later allegedly reported to be taking $50,000 in cash in kava bags, whatever, allegedly, according to some of this reporting. This guy is a joke. He is... I am using clean language on this live, but this guy is a joke. Kristi Noem is a joke. JD Vance, the vice president of the United States, went behind a podium and went, boo-hoo-hoo, the shutdown is AOC's fault, as though this man is the vice president of the United States of America. You know what I have to say to that? You look like a clown back there. You're the second most powerful person in this country, and you're crying about me? And you're blaming the whole government shutdown on me? LOL, my guy. Like, laugh at them. Make them small. These people do this in order to make themselves feel powerful. Because deep, deep, deep down inside, they feel and know how small they are. And in order for a small person to feel big, they have to crush someone else. And like that is what their whole political identity is all about. It is about this forced supremacy that is based on nothing because they feel and know how small they actually are. The point is that they are scrapping and grasping at straws because they have nothing else. Laugh at them. Stephen Miller is a clown. I've never seen that guy in real life, but he looks like he's like 4'10", and he looks like he is angry about the fact that he's 4'10", and he looks like he is so mad that he is 4'10", that he's taking that anger out at any other population possible. Like, laugh at them. Laugh at them. Also, someone said, short kings are great. Absolutely. I'm not here. I want to absolutely make sure that I talk about that. I'm not here to make fun of anyone's anything. but the way people overcompensate over their own stories is what I'm talking about there. One of the most powerful cultural things that you can do to a political movement that is predicated on the puffery of insecure masculinity. That's what this is about. This isn't, people talk about toxic masculinity, more than, it's like, let's put that to the side for just 1 second. This is about insecure masculinity.
In a fiery critique, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat, New York, unleashed a blistering takedown of President Donald Trump's administration, invoking the irreverent spirit of the 1960s Yippie protesters to expose what she calls a campaign of insecure masculinity, driving a wave of political retribution. Drawing parallels to the Vietnam War protests that forced a U.S. withdrawal by 1975, Ocasio-Cortez argued that mockery can dismantle the facade of power wielded by Trump's inner circle. Her remarks, delivered amid a government shutdown crisis, target key figures like acting ICE Director Tom Homan, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, Vice President JD Vance, and advisor Stephen Miller, whom she branded as clowns overcompensating for personal insecurities through authoritarian tactics. Ocasio-Cortez framed Trump's team as small men craving supremacy, echoing the Yippies, led by Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, who humiliated Nixon and Kissinger during the Chicago 7 trial. She likened their antics to her strategy: laugh at them, make them small. Citing Homan's alleged $50,000 cash payments in cover bags, Noem's inflammatory ICE raid videos, and Vance's shutdown blame game, she scoffed, "You're the second most powerful person in this country, and you're crying about me." Ocasio-Cortez argued their power stems from crushing others to mask fragility, a tactic she vows to counter with ridicule. The Vietnam analogy anchors her point: relentless protests, from somber veterans like John Kerry to flower-wielding hippies placing blooms in National Guard rifles, defeated America's deadliest post-World War II war. By 1975, after 8 years of escalating dissent, Democrats in Congress halted funding, forcing President Gerald Ford to concede defeat. Ocasio-Cortez sees today's fight, against Trump's DOJ assaults, ICE raids, and National Guard federalizations, as a parallel battle where defiance and humor can expose the hollowness of forced supremacy. "They're scrapping and grasping at straws because they have nothing else," she declared. Her remarks come as MSNBC exclusives reveal DOJ resistance to Trump's vendettas. In Virginia, U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, a Trump loyalist, failed to find career prosecutors to pursue charges against former FBI Director James Comey, resorting to external hires for a flimsy indictment. Another prosecutor, Elizabeth Hughes, rejected pressure to charge New York AG Letitia James, citing no evidence of mortgage fraud, and braces for firing. An open letter from 282 former DOJ officials, obtained by MSNBC, decried Trump's Nixon-level assault on DOJ independence, warning of a broader erosion of public service. Ocasio-Cortez tied these moves to a pattern: targeting black women like James, who held Trump accountable, mirrors attacks on progress itself. "This isn't just about Comey or James," she said. "It's about whether hard-won progress can survive when the law is weaponized." She mocked Miller's stature, joking he's 4 feet 10 inches and angry about it, to underscore how personal insecurities fuel policy cruelty, from Chicago's child zip-tying ICE raids to California's Guard federalization for Portland. The shutdown, now furloughing 2 million federal workers, amplifies the stakes. House Speaker Mike Johnson's refusal to negotiate, demanding a clean funding bill, clashes with Democrats' push for ACA subsidies to avert 2026 premium spikes. Ocasio-Cortez's Yippie-inspired call to laugh at them aims to deflate Trump's authoritarian puffery, much as protesters humbled Nixon's Pentagon. With midterms looming, her strategy, rooted in cultural defiance, challenges a movement she sees as built on insecure masculinity rather than substance. As DOJ prosecutors resist and governors like Newsom sue, the fight for progress, she argues, demands not just resistance but ridicule to shrink tyrants to size.